cybersecurity and the reality check behind all of it. So if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself and tell us what you do for a living.
Hi, my name is Duncan. I am a cybersecurity consultant working at BitCrack Cybersecurity. I've got 3 years cybersecurity experience behind my name. I've wanted to do this since I was about 15. It's practically in my blood. So yeah, that's pretty much all I can say about me.
Okay, cool. So when did you realize you wanted to become an ethical hacker? What's the story behind that?
So it was mainly just because I thought it was really cool. So when I was younger, I was probably around about 15, it was just, it caught my eye, and I thought, you know what, I can break the law legally. So I thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, that was the whole reason behind it. It was just purely off the fact that it was cool to do.
It's cool to do. Yeah, it does look kind of cool. When you see it on like, movies and things like that, it does look really cool.
So, yeah. Movies are generally a bit far-fetched, but yeah. You do
Okay.
you do
But
get
like
some.
so that's why we're having this conversation today, so we can talk about what it really is about, what it really looks like, and everything behind that. So what struggles have you faced on your way to becoming a specialist?
I think that it's just you have to constantly learn and teach yourself, because if you don't stay up to date, you're just going to lag behind and fall back. So it's mainly just keeping up to date, just training and ensuring that you know what you're doing. It's constantly evolving. It rapidly moves very fast. So it's just keeping up to date pretty much.
So how do you keep up to date with everything moving so fast?
It is, so generally I just watch a whole bunch of different types of forums and stuff. Like the Hacker News generally is quite a good one. I have a look at bug bounty bug bounty write-ups. It just helps see what's out there, see what people are exploiting, have a look at the OS top 10, and then just pretty much keeping up to date, reading forums, reading blogs, and yeah.
Okay, cool. So you said that you started to get into this when you were 15 years old. Now, out of curiosity, today you are actually working in this industry. So how did you build your reputation up to be hired?
So what I did personally was I just completed a whole bunch of challenges and stuff on TryHackMe and Hack the Box. It's 2 free platforms where anyone can just learn cybersecurity, from SOC to red teaming to incident response. Pretty much anything related to cybersecurity, you could probably learn it on there. So what they do is they do things known as CTFs, which is the capture the flag. So you generally get given a box that you have to try and hack into. And then obviously from there, you pretty much, once you've completed it, you get a certificate or like a badge of some sort. So what I did myself was I used to just post it on my LinkedIn. I would do a room or 2 a day. We posted on my LinkedIn, and eventually it got noticed by my current employer.
Okay, so it was just like constantly learning, constantly putting everything that you've learned into practice. Would you say that that's an important aspect to become an ethical hacker, is practicing what you're learning?
Yes, definitely practice. I know in real world engagements, it's kind of difficult because CTFs are generally more focused on a specific type of exploit or vulnerability, where every day, where real world pen testing is a little bit different, because obviously corporates are set up differently, their networks are set up in a specific way. They're probably using Active Directory more, etc. So practice does help, but at the same time, it depends on what you're doing, because it's like riding a bicycle. It's like riding a bicycle because you generally get the flow of it once you start kicking into it again. And if you have a strong background in cybersecurity or in pen testing or whatever the case might be, you generally catch on to things quite quickly. You might have not touched on it in a while, but you generally catch on. It's not something that you just forget. Yeah, it's pretty much.
That's cool. So now you've spoken about the boxes that you hack on the free platforms are a little bit different than the ones that the banks and those places use. So can you give us a list of the most common hacking techniques that are being used today? If you are in a position where you're trying to find weak points or links in a company system and you're hacking it, what type of technique would you use to hack the system to know where the weak points are?
Okay, so first thing you would do is probably doing a port scan. And what this is it's pretty much just you're scanning a host, either whether it's external or internal. You're doing enumeration. So you're port scanning the host, trying to see what the host is doing. Is it a Windows machine? Is it a Linux machine? Does it have a web page open? Does it have SSH? Any protocols open that you could potentially exploit? Maybe the service is outdated or whatever the case may be. So you're just trying to gather as much information on the target as possible. Moving on from there, you'll go into the post-enumeration phase, which would generally be actually exploiting what you found. So depending on the target, so let's say for example, in this case, it's a web portal. You notice there's a website that was publicly accessible. Your clients or whoever asked you, can you please run a pen test against this? You'll run a scan, see what the web page is using. Is it a WordPress site? Is it a Drupal site? Is it a custom-made web portal, for example? So you'll generally try and navigate these or gather this type of information, and then proceed a little bit further and go, okay, cool, if it's a WordPress site, what can I do? I can look for vulnerable, outdated plugins, for example. Maybe there's already a known vulnerability out there that I can exploit on this site. So you're generally just scanning a little bit more, just fine-tuning what you've got. And then from there, knowing if, for example, if it is a WordPress site, it generally has admin portal exposed publicly. So first thing to check there is maybe see if you can brute force it. Maybe the user is using a weak password. And vice versa. If it's a custom web portal, you're generally able to do a little bit more in terms of vulnerabilities. You can look at the OS top 10. You can try and exploit SQL injection, maybe a local file inclusion, cross-site scripting, server-side request forgery, the whole works. So you can generally try and test. It's more manual when it comes to like a custom built web page. It's more of a manual process. As generally with your website specifically, if you're hosting it on GoDaddy or whatever the case may be, and you're hosting a WordPress site, WordPress is generally very up to date. Their plugins are generally not very secure because obviously it's well-known developers, well-known people developing this type of stuff. So in most cases, it's very secure. But like I mentioned, sometimes what happens with clients is they just neglect their website and they forget, okay, cool, let me keep it up to date, ensure that there's patching necessary. Like I mentioned with the custom built web page, generally could be a freelancer or maybe a company that developed your site for you. In this case, sometimes you do have developers who might not know exactly what they're doing. So obviously there's more likelihood of you managing to exploit a specific function or exploit a specific vulnerability on that page. Do you have any questions or?
No, actually, I do. So if you are looking for the weak points and you find it, you're like, if you're now a white hacker, right? You would let someone know about this weak point. But if you are on the flip side and you're doing this for personal gains or whatever reason possible, then you're going to use that weak point to your advantage, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So in most cases, generally your bad actors, your black hats in this instance, they're obviously doing this on a very large scale. They have tools that are automated to scan multiple different hosts. They're not specifically, in most cases, they're not specifically targeting you as an individual, but they have a look at a broad range of hosts. So maybe they decide, okay, cool, I'm going to target South African ISPs. So what they're going to do is they're obviously going to do a little bit of research, see, okay, cool, these are the top 20 ISPs in South Africa. These are their subnet ranges. This is this, blah, 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 blah. And then they're going to scan and see what they can find. There's a really cool site. I'll share my screen with you now. Let me just type on there. Called Shodan. So what I can do here, for example, is I can search, let's do IPMI. Okay, so what this vulnerability is it's IPMI. It's a service used, not 100% sure, but it's used for authentication mainly. In most cases, this IPMI is a very outdated, old vulnerability. So what attackers can do is we can target these hosts. As you can see, there's 20,000 hosts in the US alone. There's 4,700 in China. There's 4,600 in Russia. The list can go on.
Okay.
And here's just as an example, here's just one single company. So this EGI hosting has 2,500 hosts vulnerable or exposed over the web. So just more on this vulnerability specifically is I can grab any one of these hosts and I can grab the hash for their portal. Let me just go into one of these. So you'll see, this is where I mentioned where you'll scan and look for open ports. As you can see, this host has port 80 and port 443 open. So generally it means it's a web page.
Okay.
I can visit this web page as well.
It's actually ridiculous how much data is available for anyone.
Yeah. So just as an example, it's super micro. So it's obviously a login page. Getting further back into what this vulnerability allows me to do is for the login portal, I can grab the hash. So what a hash is, it's just an encrypted password, pretty much. It's what a hash is generally referred to as. So with the hash, obviously, as a malicious attacker, I could grab the hash. I'm not going to do this, obviously, because it's illegal. I don't have permission to do this. But I can grab the hash for this login portal, and I could potentially log in if I'm able to crack the password. So if this host had a weak password, I could exploit it and log into this machine. Obviously, like I mentioned, really fancy here, or technical, but yeah, I could potentially log in because I could grab this hash. And that was just off of a quick search on Shodan. I can maybe look for, say, camera. I can have a look here, and here's just a whole bunch of stuff where they have cameras exposed over the web. So here's a Hikvision IP camera. Some of these obviously will have passwords, but sometimes you can view them publicly. There is sites and stuff that allow you to view them.
So you basically just need to know which site to go to and how to use it, and then you can figure the rest out.
Pretty much, yeah. So in most cases, this tool is probably very handy because, like I mentioned again, there's thousands of hosts. There's 4.3 million exposed cameras out on the web. 4.6 million cameras exposed. So generally what attackers would do here is they would look for default credentials, because obviously Hikvision is a very well-known brand. They come pre-installed with a default password of admin1234. If that doesn't work, what attackers generally would do is, like I mentioned, they will look at your password policy. Maybe you've got a weak password, so trying to log in as admin or admin1234 or whatever the case may be.
But what would you say is a weak password? Like, is it anything that's not a bunch of numbers and letters scrambled together?
So the thing with passwords is it's just generally your length. Because if you have a weak password, so let's say, for example, I create a password, and because I want to remember it, I make it my girlfriend's name and I make it her date of birth.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's a very bad idea because your social media is exposed over the web. Your Facebook, you have Instagram, you have Twitter, you have a whole works. Generally, if an attacker specifically wanted to target you, they would do something known as OSINT, which is, can't remember the abbreviation, it will come back to me, but what it pretty much allows you to do is scan the web. You scan the web for anything. Sorry. Let me just grab OSINT for you, because I'm not going to. Okay, there. So OSINT is open source intelligence gathering. So what you're doing there is, let's say if I wanted to target you specifically, Bianca, obviously I know your surname now, I know your first name, I know what you look like. So I can go on, look through Instagram, Facebook, look and see if I can find your profile on those platforms. Then I can obviously have a look and go, okay, cool, Bianca has a boyfriend. I can grab his name. Maybe I can grab your mom's and your dad's names as well, because obviously you're friends with these people. Generally in those types of things, then I can generally grab a list of all this information. I can create a dictionary of all this information, and using this information, I can potentially gather and I can potentially crack your, obviously I can grab and crack your password with this. I just want to grab this one tool.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Because most people think I'm going to make a password so I can remember it, not realizing that, it's so easy to access everything about you, and then they use it.
Yeah, so it's generally, like I mentioned, in most cases, I think your top 3 things in keeping secure as an individual is just making sure you have a very secure password. A secure password, keeping your system, so your computers, your computer specifically, your phone, keeping that type of stuff up to date. And then finally, just enabling multi-factor authentication. Because it just makes it very difficult for me to obviously use the information gathered.
Okay.
So obviously crack your stuff. I just quickly wanted to just show you this. So here's a list on GitHub from SecLists. It's a very common thing that us attackers use, or us red teamers use on day-to-day pen tests and stuff. Because what we can gather here is this is in 2020. So this is the 200 of the most used passwords in 2020. And you can see a lot of the stuff is very weak. Maybe like Chocolates, Master, there's Nicole, there's Bailey. So obviously it's very common names. people using love me, people using the word password a lot.
The fact that people use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is just brilliant.
You'd be surprised. I've done work for a lot of banks, a lot of mines, and obviously I can't give you the names, but
yeah, no.
A lot of people do. They use the word password. It's very, very common. It's not something that's unique to anyone. So yeah, and there's another thing that we can do with these word lists, for example. So obviously you see that it's 888, baby girl, Charlie, Samantha, purple, blah, blah, blah. What I could do as an attacker is there's a thing known as rule lists, specifically to password cracking, is it will add, for example, it will make it purple at 1234 or purple exclamation mark 2023 as an example. Because obviously today, generally when you create a password, it always requires you to create a password with a special character, a number, and obviously maybe an uppercase letter.
Yeah.
So what attackers have done is we've created things known as, like I mentioned, rule lists, which will take the word purple. It will capitalize the first P. At the end of the word, it will maybe do an at and then do 2023 because that's what the year is. And obviously, in a lot of cases in a lot of corporate networks, this sadly is what happens because obviously, as an individual, you just create the word. You go, okay, cool. I like the color purple. I'm going to create my password as purple. Oh, I need an uppercase letter. Uppercase the first letter. I need a letter and a special character. Oh, sorry, a number and a special character. What am I going to do at the end of my word? I'm just going to add 2023. And it happens a lot. So generally, like I mentioned, when creating a strong and secure password is to just create something like this. There's a lot of stuff online that does help you. It's personal. I think they do have a password generator. I just want to.
Is this like a site you can use to generate?
Yes. Yeah. So here, so I can go. So I can even select easy to read, easy to say. I can make the password longer.
Okay. So
yeah, you can just generally, so for example, it's definitely not going to be in a word list. Because obviously,
not a word.
Type and D. It's something that's easily remembered. Obviously, depending on what you're busy signing into or whatever the case may be, you can generally remember it. So one way of creating a very secure password is generally just think of a phrase. So maybe you like horse riding, as an example. So I will say, I, Bianca, love horse riding. So the nice thing about this is it's already 23 characters long. So meaning it's very unlikely that it's going to be in a word list. Now what you can do is, let's say, for example, like I mentioned, you can, okay, it fixed itself. Let me just open up a, text file. Make it a bit bigger as well. So I love horse riding. Okay. So like I mentioned, maybe your thing will it needs one special character. One special, one number, and an uppercase. So what you could do here is I can go, okay, cool. I love horse riding, and then maybe make the E a 3 as an example. So that's just, like I mentioned, it's just a phrase. Anyone can remember I love horse riding. It's not a difficult thing to know. But what's unique here is because it's 23 characters long, or in this case 16, but because it's very long, What you can do is you can go, okay, cool. It's very unlikely that an attacker will have this in their word list. So it's very unlikely that they will have a 16 character long password, and the rule list will specifically only change the O in love to a 0. Because generally what our rule lists do is it will change all the O's. It won't change just a single one.
So mixing it up is a good idea.
So mixing it up is a very good idea. And don't do it for, like I mentioned, it's just make your password very, very long. And then also just try and change up a little bit of the letters. So like I mentioned, it's very easy to remember. You know that in the word love, you have a 0, and in horse you have a 3, and then in writing you have an exclamation mark replacing one of the I's. It matches all these use cases that most people use in like Office, Google, etc. They all use these types of things. It's meeting the length requirements. It's 16 characters long, so nobody's going to be able to brute force this because it will take extremely long to brute force. And also as a plus, it's very unlikely that it's going to be in a word list that we use to crack passwords.
It's actually quite interesting how you can make it more secure by being a little bit more creative with it.
Yeah, it's just being creative. The alternative that I use is I just use a password manager, because it will create very long and complex passwords, and I don't need to remember them because the password manager will do it for me. Obviously, just the only thing that I need to do there is the password for the password manager and the backup codes that they sent you to, if in case you forget the password. It's just I need to make sure that I store that stuff in a secure location. So maybe on a notepad that you carry around every day, for example, because it's very unlikely that that's going to be used. And also nobody's going to look through your notepad and go, oh, this is definitely the thing that they're using for their password manager, as an example.
Okay, that makes sense. So looking at this and thinking about the fact that they are looking for weak points, and I've done some research on ransomware and malware and viruses and worms and all those things. In your opinion, which hacking technique or tool or software does the most damage?
So generally, it's your social engineering. So this is where it comes into phishing and stuff like that. So this is generally where most companies, when I say most, it's probably about, if I rough ball it, I would say probably about 80% of companies are probably compromised this way. It's generally because their staff is not well trained. Either their staff have weak passwords, or they don't have MFA enabled, or they click on phishing links. So what a phishing link does is it's pretty much me pretending to be somebody else. It will be, Bianca, I see you like horse riding. So what I would do is I would send you a mail pretending to be maybe a horse riding company, or maybe one of the stables in your local neighborhood. And I'd say, okay, cool, we've got this competition going on. Would you like to sign up? The grand prize is $10,000, whatever the case may be. Obviously, I'd send you this link. Little do you know that the link that you click on is actually redirecting you to a website that I control. And obviously, because I can control it, any information you send me, obviously, it will call back, it will get given back to me. So what in most cases people do in corporate companies, it happens with a lot of our clients as well, is you'll see the phishing link. Let's say, for example, I'll use the horse riding as an example. I'll say, okay, cool, sign up with your Office account. Your Office's account is what you use for your corporate environment, obviously. So what you would do is you'll log into your Office account, and I have your login username and password. Once you send me the information, I will obviously, I generally, as a threat actor, I will have a script running in the background that will very quickly try and log in to your account. if it's successful and doesn't require multi-factor authentication, so 2FA, then obviously I've got access to your Office account. I can quickly change your password and I can lock you out. Then another thing that you also could do is I could maybe use that information later on. Maybe it's you've got password reuse. So now what I can do is I can go and target your Instagram, your Facebook, and all that type of stuff. I can see, okay, cool. Are you reusing the same password for all your applications or all your devices? You could be reusing it for your banking. I can obviously try and log in that way as well. So that's the thing known as password reuse. It's also very common in corporate environments with individuals. I know, as an example, I know I've changed it luckily, but I know that my girlfriend did the same thing. She would also use the same password for everything. And obviously it's just a very bad security practice because, like I mentioned, if one of your accounts gets compromised, you practically compromised all of them at the same time.
That's really scary.
Yeah.
Because everyone is thinking like I know I used to always think like that. If I make the same password for everything, then it's easier to remember it and I can't lock myself out of my phone. But now it's like you have to be aware that there's this whole new realm of crime that's evolved. And we need to be like we lock our doors at night. This is like the exact same policy. You have to lock the things that matter to you. And since everything is digital, this is a really, really important conversation that we should be having with everyone who's got a device.
It's another thing that I always get an argument back on from individuals in my personal life is generally what they would say is they'll just be like, okay, cool, but what is an attacker going to gain out of me? As an example, they're going to be like, so obviously they just assume they're like, okay, cool, I don't care that my password is weak because what do I bring that makes me such a vulnerable, valuable target, as an example?
Yeah.
The problem is obviously we're dealing with bad guys. They will do anything for money, practically. So if your Instagram gets compromised, you might have colleagues that are on there that follow you. You might have family members, as an example. What an attacker could potentially do is they could ruin your reputation. They could maybe post racial slurs or maybe post pornography on your Instagram, as an example. And obviously, because of this, it causes issues where now, let's say a company wants to hire you in the future, they're obviously going to do research on you. They're going to go, okay, cool, let's see if what does this guy look like? They go and look at your Instagram. They go and look at your LinkedIn page, or as an example. And obviously, going further than that, they'll obviously see, okay, cool, I see that he's commenting on videos that are, like I mentioned, maybe they're racist or something like that. I don't want this person working for me, so I'm not going to hire him. So it just ruins your reputation. And it's just one thing that people should also just be aware of is it ruins your reputation. And then also what an attacker could do is if they compromise your account, they could maybe target people you're close to. So like I mentioned, if I compromise you, Bianca, I can maybe go and message your boyfriend or your mom or your dad, whatever the case may be, maybe your sister or brother. I can obviously go and target them because obviously they trust in you. So obviously if you send them something that looks believable, they very likely are going to click on it. And obviously it just compromises your family members as well. So it's more a case of just keeping yourself and the people around you secure.
So with this in mind, in your experience in the realm of cybersecurity and hacking, what was the most shocking thing that you've discovered about hacking?
To be honest, it's generally just users per se, because obviously I know it's very difficult to teach them. It's going to be around for ages. It's always going to be a problem where your user is your weakest link. So you as an individual are the weakest link because you might not be aware, you might be tired the one day, and you might not even read the mail correctly, and you might click on the link. Obviously, your passwords are generally very weak. So as a user, you're just not aware. And that's probably your weakest link in any corporate environment. It doesn't matter how much your company spends on security, your users are always the problem. Because, like I mentioned before, if a user does click on a malicious link that an attacker gains access to, they could potentially log in. If they log into your account, they can send internal mails to all your colleagues around you, posing as you. And again, like I mentioned, because your colleagues trust you, they might click on the link. So it's just keeping yourself aware. And then, yeah, the weakest link is probably just the human element in the technical space.
Okay, that makes sense. It makes sense. So, taking all of this information in now, right? How would I identify an email to be a phishing email and not the real deal? Because I remember you did like a whole presentation for us, and it really looked like an F&B platform. And I've realized that most of these phishing links, they look legit. And me myself, I suffered from an attack in this way where it was so well crafted and put together. It was almost impossible to see the facade behind it all. So what would your advice be in that area?
It's just being aware. So in the case of like phishing links, generally your companies won't send you links. They won't send you SMSs. They won't require like really urgent attention. Obviously, you also do get cell phone scams, but I don't know how popular it is in Turkey and other countries. But for example, Truecaller. Generally, you can see, okay, cool, it's spam. You can generally validate that number that they're phoning you off of is legitimately F&B or MTN or APSA as an example. So you can just do a background check. You can validate it. You can also, what you can do is you can also send, in the case of like a phishing link, if you don't get redirected to F&B's website directly and you can physically see that it's F&B, let me just quickly find that phishing link and then I will maybe be able to help you a little bit more.
Because it's insane how much effort they put into building this thing and making it look like the real deal.
It's, yeah, generally we because obviously you got a lot of very smart people out there. Generally they just create these links and they create these tools that make it very easy for us to grab the information. So from an attacker's point of view, it's generally very quick and easy to set up. It doesn't take long at all, which is also another very scary aspect to it.
Yeah. You know what, while you're looking for the phishing link, something that I found out that gave me like a shock is the fact that there are hackers out there that hack systems just to build up a reputation. They don't want money or anything else. They just want to have some form of track record saying, I've done this and this is how good I am.
It is very common. And obviously people do malicious stuff as well. Maybe they'll target, like, there is instances, most bad actors, they generally have ethics behind them. So maybe they won't attack schools, they won't attack charities, they won't attack hospitals, etc. But obviously, there's also some people who do not care and they just care about the money or the reputation or whatever the case may be. So they do target these types of people. And generally, like I mentioned, in most cases, it's like anything really. It's always about money at the end of the day. You do obviously get these people who do want to create a reputation for themselves. In that instance, it's not as common from my experience, but it does happen. It's where people just decide, okay, cool, I'm just going to cause malicious harm just because I can. And yeah, it's like something I've obviously frowned upon. I think I was just raised differently. Like I've had ample opportunity to cause a lot of harm, but it's just, like I mentioned, in my guts, it just doesn't feel right. So you just leave it alone and you move on and you help. You just try and help where you can. It's what I do.
Yeah, it's actually like an honorable job that you have, like taking what most people are using for their own benefit and turning it into something that helps somebody else. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give someone who has just realized that they've been hacked? Like they made the mistake, they clicked on the link, what now?
So first thing, if you do get compromised, the first thing I would do is just quickly going to have a look at so obviously firstly have a look at what has been compromised or what has been the issue. So let's say, for example, your Gmail was hacked. Obviously, your Gmail is generally connected to a lot of your devices. Maybe it's connected to your banking, it's connected to your Instagram, Facebook, whatever the case may be. So in that instance, obviously just change your password for all the other platforms. So change your password, then maybe go and have a look at, so I'm just quickly, where you could have potentially been compromised. So there's a site here, which is called Have I Been Pawned? And pretty much what it does is it has a large database of breaches that's happened in the last couple of days. So as an example here, you'll see that there's 772 million records in #1 accounts. And if I click on this, it will mention in January a large collection of credentials stuffing list, combinations, email addresses, passwords used to hijack accounts and other services, blah, blah, blah. The data contained 2.7 billion records, including 773 million unique email addresses along with passwords. So that's obviously a big problem because whatever it was, I don't know exactly which site this was. Let me choose a different one that might be a bit better. Here's MySpace. So in 2008, it's a bit old now, but it's just a good example. In 2008, MySpace suffered a data breach that exposed 360 million accounts. So obviously, if you had a MySpace account, your password is very likely to be there. It's very likely to be part of the data breach. It does also happen where companies like Facebook get compromised. I think Facebook suffered a data breach in 2021. I might be wrong there, but I think it was in 2021, where it exposed your address, your relationship, a whole bunch of like personal stuff. It didn't expose passwords with the Facebook breach, but it does expose a little bit more personal stuff. I think it also did expose ID numbers as well. So in this case, generally when you have been hacked or you think you might have been compromised, it's a good idea to just type your email in on Have I Been Pawned, see if there's anything that could potentially pop up. Because in some cases, the attackers aren't generally after you, they're generally after bigger fish. They're after big companies. So for example, in this case, there was Activision that was compromised. There's Horsile, there's Apex SMS, there's DB Forms, there's Aviva. The list goes on. It's not just them. In total, there's 12.7 billion accounts that have been exposed or breached that have been pawned because of a data breach. Yeah, sorry. And then in terms of, sorry, if you have been hacked or have been breached, it's a good idea, like I mentioned, to just put your email in, see if there's any information on you. I sadly don't have an email address that I can use that will give me an example, but it's just a good idea to maybe keep up to date, because maybe the attacker is not specifically after you, but they are after Facebook, and Facebook does suffer a data breach. Your information is obviously on Facebook, so it's usually sold on the dark web. So in most cases, people do have access to this information. They can potentially try and crack your password, or if the password was secured and poorly secured, they might have your password in plain text. So generally, if you have suffered from a data breach, just change your passwords, make sure it's well kept, and also just enable 2FA, because it just adds a second security barrier for an attacker. Because yes, I might have your password, but if you have 2FA enabled, I still need that 2FA code to log into your account. So it's just a good idea to keep that enabled. Yeah, it's pretty much all you can really do. Just be aware and just, yeah.
Put up more walls.
Yeah, a bit of more walls.
Okay, this is really interesting. So, in light of this, have you ever experienced or suffered from a hacking?
Myself personally, it was mainly probably when I was younger. Obviously, because I used to play a lot of games when I was younger. I would obviously download illegal torrents, and I'll download illegal games. And generally, with this game, you generally have maybe a virus, or there's generally a virus, some form of malware that's attached to this type of stuff. So yeah, I have been compromised. It was just because I was being silly. Obviously I was young. I didn't want to pay for these games. I don't have that money. So I just decided I'm going to download free movies, free video games, maybe free music as an example. Yeah.
Yeah, and also you've been building up a lot of knowledge around cybersecurity and the realm of hacking. So I'm guessing that it wouldn't hit you as hard as
I,
someone who just has no idea what's going on.
it's the same reason why like me personally, I wouldn't want to use a Windows machine on a corporate environment. So if I'm using a company laptop, I wouldn't really feel safe keeping anything personal on there. Just because I know how easy it is for, even if it's just your internal guys, like your administrators, obviously they have the administrator password, so they can log into your laptop whether you want them or not. It's just something that just doesn't sit right. So generally, I would prefer not to ever use a Windows machine in a corporate environment, or keep anything personal on there if I have to. Just because, like I mentioned, if you have, and in a corporate environment, if you have that administrator password, you can do a lot of damage. It's also not specifically just to you as an individual. It's obviously to everyone in the organization. So yeah, it's just something new.
Yeah, because like listening to you talk about it, the mind of a hacker just sees everyone else's collateral damage, trying to get to that which they are actually aiming for.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the times, generally when I am on a pen test as well, I do have to put myself in that mindset of what would what would a threat actor do? Because generally how our reports are structured is we would give an executive summary, just explaining like the overall findings of whatever we found. Then we'll give a technical analysis of exactly what was exploitable. Maybe your website had an outdated plugin and we could gain remote code execution, and we could gain full control over the website remotely, as an example. Or it might not be as severe. Maybe you just have a few outdated services that just require a patch, just because in future it could potentially lead to a vulnerability. Then getting more towards your question, generally it's just there's always some sort of risk associated with whatever we exploit or whatever we find. Yes, it might not seem like a big issue now, as an example. Maybe maybe the company has been around for the last 40 years and they've never experienced a data breach. It doesn't mean that it cannot happen to you. There's still the possibility, there's still that risk that it could potentially happen. At the same time, it's also in, like I mentioned, with the corporate environments, generally you might have, oh, we don't want to update this server because it's going to cost the company a lot to upgrade it. So generally what would happen then is the company has to associate a risk with it. They have to be like, okay, cool, is it worth keeping the system up to date? Because generally if you are compromised and if something is exploitable and you haven't patched it after a pen test, it's at your own risk, pretty much. It's, you knew it was vulnerable, why didn't you patch it? You need to associate the risk with that and say, okay, cool, maybe the attacker can only get access to that specific machine, so that risk makes it so that you can isolate that host, or maybe just make sure that there's constant monitoring on that host to make sure that nothing happens. Yeah, just going more over the risk, the risk itself is pretty much just what are you willing to compromise in order to stay secure. As an example, if you have a weak password, or if you know you have weak passwords and you know you're reusing the passwords, it's at your own risk to do so. You should know, okay, cool, I could potentially get hacked one day and potentially leak all this information. Is it worth the risk of having a weak password? Is it worth it, pretty much? You just need to scale it at, is it anything worth or valuable to you that could be a problem later on?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was reading a lot of articles and I was writing a blog post, and then I found myself writing this phrase which fits in exactly with what you're saying. And it's, you have to decide, do you want to pay for something because you have to, or because it's an investment into your security? And I think that just brings everything back to, it's your responsibility to be safe and to be cyber safe specifically. And we are in this whole purpose of trying to bring awareness to everyone about how important this is and how educated you actually need to be. Because it actually happened the other day where someone, just like I think a couple of days after we had the talk with you, and all the research I've been doing, someone actually tried to get me to click on a phishing link in our company email. And because of like just that one talk with you and reading a couple of articles, it put me in a position where I could see this is fishy. This
Yeah.
is not, this doesn't make sense. Like, why are you insisting that I click on this thing or do this thing? Why do you want my number? And then when the person said, I'm the CEO of Skills Alliance, what's the problem? I was like, oh no, you're not this is not gonna fool me. And it was such an empowering moment of being like, you know what? I didn't have to do a degree in something or go through some form of short course. I just needed to have a conversation about the truth, about what's really going on. So I think this interview is going to be really, really great. And it's good to know that there are people like you out there that are fighting the good fight on other people's behalf who are being ignorant and lazy.
Yeah, I've also gotten a lot of people in trouble because of it. But at the end of the day, it's just to make sure that the client or whoever, just to make sure that the individual or client is secure and happy, pretty much. It's just exposing the risk, and then obviously this is also another reason why I really wanted to do it, was also because I've always wanted to tell. I didn't want other people to tell me what to do. I wanted to tell people what to do. And obviously in cybersecurity, that's what you do. That you do that with your clients. You give them the harsh truth of your security is really bad. you really need to patch this. So it's generally, you do have a more like an aggressive approach with them sometimes, where you're like, guys, like you really need to fix this. Like it's really not okay to run around with this type of stuff. Or we've done work for, like I mentioned, banks, financial institutions, mines, like the whole works. A lot of the findings are very common and very spread across the whole board. It's not like it's unique to that specific individual as well. And in a lot of cases, like I mentioned, it's just the user might not just be aware. And that obviously generally just is what leads to the compromise of whatever service you're using.
Yeah, no, it seems like this whole conversation is packaged into only the realm of IT, and everyone outside of it is not really talking about it or the seriousness of it. So these are the type of conversations that we need to be having, especially with corporate companies who deal with a lot of employees who work from home, and you need to have that like communication between your team to know, but would this person actually really ask me to do this? Let
Yeah.
me check in with them, you know?
Yeah, if the malicious stuff is coming from somebody you know personally, maybe you deal with them on a day-to-day, like I mentioned, you can just message them. You've got their number on WhatsApp probably, or you can SMS them and just say like, hey, I see you sent me a mail. Is this like, are you sure about this? I'm just a bit confused, or whatever the case may be. You don't have to act like you don't know. You can just double check with them. I can guarantee you they'll prefer you doing that than you sending X, Y, and Z. We've had clients who were hit with phishing and they sent a very large amount of money to threat actors just because the user didn't want to validate it with their manager. So they just sent it through and they didn't double check or validate that the person was legitimate. I just quickly wanted to show you this one last thing.
Yeah.
I remember you were mentioning that F&B site that was.
Yeah, so people can see how legit it actually looks and that we're not making this up.
Yeah, I see that they've obviously flagged it, and they've obviously marked the URL as malicious because, as you can see, it's disabled. It mentions it was disabled due to used maliciously or used in spam, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, so this is when someone reports something as being spam. Do you have a site or a link that we can let people know if you feel like you were just about spammed or this was a phishing, where can you report it?
There is. I'm trying to think of what the website is called quickly. Virus. I think it's Virus Total. For a second. Yes. Okay. Good. Yeah. See, so you can give it a URL. So in this case, you can send it, and then there you can see there's a whole bunch of people who marked it as malicious.
Okay.
Obviously, you do get a lot of clean, but already just the fact that there's already 4 of them that's busy marketing as a threat, I wouldn't trust it.
Yeah, no, one is enough.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes the one can just be because of something. So sometimes one isn't too bad of an issue, but yeah, it's just generally a good idea to maybe just double check it.
Okay. This is really good. This is interesting. It's good for people to have like a practical, okay, I've heard about this. How do I apply this now?
Just another thing with this site that you also could do is I could search for a file and I can upload a file. And what it would do is, let's say, for example, you got an attachment from somebody that you're not 100% sure of. You can obviously just put that attachment into VirusTotal and it will tell you if there's anything malicious on it. So maybe you get sent a Word document or PDF from somebody, and you're not 100% sure, you can always just throw it onto VirusTotal and it should tell you.
Okay. So just to clarify, right, because I know as much about IT as you probably know about horse riding, but if something has a virus in it, is it literally just the coding of the software that has the virus encoded into it, or is it attached to, I don't, like, how does that work?
So in most cases, what we would do is just depending on how the attack is going or what you're busy exploiting, but generally in a phishing link or a phishing mail. Generally, I haven't really touched on it because I don't really do threat hunting. There's a whole subdivision in cybersecurity specifically targeted at this. But in most cases, what they would do is they might attach um, their malicious stuff into a Word document, as an example. They might attach it into it. There's a thing called macros in Windows. And what that allows you to do is, like I mentioned, it allows you to run code whenever that Word document is run. So whenever you open the Word document, it will run the code as well. Or it will run the
Okay.
malicious code in this instance. Generally from there, what happens is generally the malicious code generally redirects you, or maybe it waits a couple minutes before it does it. It will redirect you and download malicious files from somewhere else on the web. Generally, it's something that the attacker owns. And obviously from there, what it would do is it could potentially compromise. If you don't have an active antivirus on your machine or anything like that, you generally do get compromised because of that. Because most exploits and stuff are designed to bypass AV, more specifically the very common AVs, so like antivirus, Avast, Windows Defender, etc. It's just very common. They're very common, so it's very likely that they're going to be bypassed because of it.
Okay.
It's a very technical aspect to encoding it, but I'm not going to get into that. But what the attacker pretty much does is it encodes it, and they send you the link. Your AV doesn't pick up on it. The code is run, and then, like I mentioned, it might grab more information from the web, and that obviously can lead to where you're getting compromised or lead to further issues down the line.
Okay, sure. That feels like a whole topic on its own.
Yeah, it really is. Because you get
Okay.
different forms of malware as well. You get cookie stealers, you get credential stealers, you get keyloggers, you get the whole work. You get obviously ransomware, where they will encrypt your data on your laptop and then obviously sell that information back to you or try to. So yeah, it does get very very technical.
It's like a sticky situation that just doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't. And the
Sure.
sad thing is with AI, it's also attackers are obviously using it to create phishing links that look legitimate. So the people with very bad English in most cases, they decide, okay, cool, I'm gonna throw it into ChatGPT. ChatGPT will rectify all the English and then it will compose the email correctly. So it becomes more legitimate.
That's just insane. It's like the more we advance in technology and utilize it to benefit the world, the more something else is using it to just drag us back down.
Pretty much. It's the sad truth of technology. You can look at it at anything though, to be honest, because you can always look at, for example, your cars. The tech in cars is busy increases. So now what hijackers are doing is they're running around with jammers to jam your
Mhm.
car keys to try and log in, like steal your car,
Yeah,
as an example.
true.
The world of criminals, pretty much, it's always evolving. It's the same as our day-to-day lives. It's also always evolving. So it's just trying to
Yeah.
stay one step ahead.
Yeah, and I truly believe awareness is the number one way to stay ahead of them, because it doesn't help if they know more about these things than you do, because then you're just automatically losing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Carl. This was really, really great. I am a little bit nervous having a Gmail account and all those other things, but it's okay. I'm going to take your advice And I believe that this interview is going to help shed some light on the whole misconception that people have about cybersecurity and how to actually be safe in today's world.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.